Welcome to another edition of the Hologram News Network. On this week's episode, our main headline is the update on Star Atlas's financial runway. Star Atlas recently held their first town hall of 2023, and there were a number of significant updates on Sage, Unreal Engine 5, and more. Later in the show, guest commentator Signal joins us to talk about the community's reaction to Star Atlas 2023 roadmap and what potential revenue models Automata might have in mind. All this and more on this week's episode. Once again, I'm your host, Kriggs, and you're listening to the Hologram News Network. Before we get into this week's main story, here are a couple of headlines from the week. Star Atlas was nominated and won the Most Engaged Community Award during the Web3 Gamer Awards on January 31st in Miami, Florida. CEO Michael Wagner accepted the award on behalf of Automata and thanked the community for their continued support. In DAO news, Star Atlas launched their DAO Treasury Viewer, which enables communal insight into the Star Atlas DAO treasury. There are currently $1.7 million in the Star Atlas treasury, which in the future will be managed by the community through the Star Atlas DAO. Now turning towards our main headline for the week, Star Atlas held their first official town hall for 2023. Star Atlas has confirmed that they are moving away from their rolling 3-week town hall schedule and will only hold town halls when there are significant announcements to update or pass. The main issue on everyone's mind was whether there was an update on Star Atlas's runway. Wagner wasted no time in addressing the concern and stated that Star Atlas had enough runway to comfortably get them to September of 2023. While Wagner did not specify the exact details on Star Atlas's finances, a number of factors have likely contributed towards the extension. Star Atlas raised nearly $2 million from the Start Sequence campaign, which ended on January 31st, and Wagner also revealed that the company had recovered, quote, a decent amount, end quote, of the money that was previously lost to FTX's collapse. The company itself has also gone through considerable internal restructuring, and Automata has also reduced its overall payroll. Lastly, Wagner confirmed that Automata had spoken with over 30 venture capital companies and were in advanced negotiations with a few. Due to disclosure agreements, Wagner could not comment further. Now turning to Sage, Wagner commented that Sage still had a target date for the first quarter of 2023. However, this version of Sage, known as the tech demo, will be broken up into even smaller segments and rolled out over time in sequence. Thus, the first iteration of the module that will eventually become Sage will be a movement-only module where players will explore the Star Atlas map and ensure functionality of on-chain programs. To incentivize player participation, Wagner stated that there will be hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of discoverable prizes in the game, to include a Commander-class Thimble tank ship, which itself has a VWAP value of nearly 100,000. Further comments by the Star Atlas team members in the Star Atlas Discord hinted that the movement module may be released as early as within the next few weeks. The Town Hall also provided several showroom updates to include details on showroom versions 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. Version 2.1 will include the first Star Atlas ground racetrack for up to 8 players and the direct integration of the Star Atlas marketplace into the UE5 showroom. Players will be able to purchase assets directly in the showroom without breaking the experience to move to a web browser market. On the Polis DAO, 2023 will focus on the rollout of the Star Atlas governance system, Polis improvement proposals, and discourse management. Other news from the Star Atlas Town Hall included an update on DAC profiles and player profiles, where guilds will be able to officially register their organization. Lastly, Star Atlas has begun the process of opening its IP rights to content and product creators without an official licensing agreement. Creators will be able to earn up to $1 million without having to sign an agreement. Stay tuned. After the break, guest commentator Signal joins us to discuss some of the lingering questions and concerns from the Star Atlas Town Hall and how Star Atlas will get through the remainder of 2023. The question remains, will it be enough?
This week's episode is brought to you by TikuBot. Automate your market buy and sell orders with ease and peace of mind. While you're away, TikuBot keeps your orders in play. Learn more at tikubot.com. That's TIGUBOT.com. TikuBot, your market made ready.
On this week's main feature, we cover the community's reaction to the Star Atlas Town Hall. While a good majority of the community was satisfied with the updates from the Town Hall, there were a few members of the community who still had lingering concerns and questions. Lloyd, leader of the Club Guild, expressed further questions as to whether Sage was still on track for a first quarter release, and if not, what was holding up development from the company's end. Community member Jaywalk also had concerns about the runway extension and the bridge between 6 to 9 months from previous public statements and the new runway date of September 2023. To talk about some of these community concerns is guest commentator Signal. Signal, welcome back.
Hey, absolute pleasure to be here, my friend. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you back on the show today, but we'll jump right into the questions here. This town hall is one that the community had been waiting on for some time. From your purview, does it adequately address some of the concerns and questions that have been building over the past few months?
I'd say absolutely it does. Um, People are always going to want more details than what they're getting. But that being said, a lot of us wanted to come into this and get some kind of granularity and clarity into the financial position of Automata. We know that they've been trying to raise funds. We didn't know that they were negotiating with some brokerage equity people from FTX. They managed to get money back for that. They managed to get money from Start Sequence. We kind of wanted to know where they stood financially and in terms of their runway following these things. We got clarity into that. They added approximately 5 months to their runway. They were previously looking at 6 to 9 months. I would have imagined the 6 months is what they would have had without any changes. 9 months would have included a lot of different cuts and ugly things to reduce their operating expenses significantly. And here we are, 60 to 90 days from that date, and we've got 8 months ahead of us. So they significantly extended their runway. That's without any VC deal being struck. We know they're in late stage negotiations with several VCs. So that could happen as well. And that would push us, I'm sure, beyond 12 months. And that's again, assuming no bull market, no revenue of any kind from Sage being launched, the game picking up and expanding. I think we got a lot of information. We got some color on a couple of different things. In Foundation Room recently, we started getting more information on specifically what's been holding us up with Sage. I think it was a really good town hall. I didn't leave it feeling like absolutely every question in the world had been answered. We had all the information we could ever possibly want, but I got a heck of a lot out of it. And I got a lot of what I wanted. Granted, I'm a finance guy. I'm an investor. I know a lot of us are. Nothing would make me happier than Automata just completely opening up their balance sheet and income statements and showing us exact figures on all of these things. But we're never going to get that. It's just not going to happen. For what we did get, I was happy.
Aside from the news about the runway extension to September, another big piece of news that came out was the brokered deal of the sale of FTX assets. A lot of people have questions on what that means or what that looks like. Can you tell us what a possible brokered deal would look like that Star Atlas would have executed?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So let's start with the fact that, we speculate on exactly how much was lost on FTX. We know it was somewhere around 10 or $15 million. So there's distressed equity firms that specialize in buying out positions from distressed companies. So in this particular case, I believe the exchange rate right now is somewhere around 15 to 20% for funds that were on FTX. Someone's willing to give you, 15 to 20 cents on the dollar today, and they're going to take on the risk of the FTX bankruptcy, hoping that they'll get some kind of upside on it. In exchange, you get certainty. You get to know that you at least got something out of it. Off of a lot of the things that we've been seeing with FTX lately, I mean, we could be lucky if maybe, I don't know, 3-4 years from now, people get back 50% of what they had stored on those exchanges. And still, that's a big if. That's a long time away. If you're a startup like Star Atlas, having, say, like $5 to $7 million 3 to 4 years from now, when the project has either already succeeded or failed, or having a, $1.5 to $2.5 million right now today, they absolutely are going to choose 10 times out of 10 to have that money today to feed the project, get it across the finish line so they can kick some content out there and get this thing going. So I think it was smart. In Michael's position, in their position, I would have made the same play 10 times out of 10. If they weren't pushing that, I'd be more concerned. If they wanted 50% of their funds back 3 or 4 years from now, that tells me they're not really trying to survive. They're going to let things burn out. They're going to scrape together the ashes later for themselves. they're doing everything they can to get all the money that they can right now, immediately, so that they can push the project. I think it was a good call.
Based off of your estimations, it could have possibly been that Star Atlas recovered 20% of that 10 to $15 million from FTX, which probably would be $2 to $3 million. And what you basically said is that Star Atlas is accepting the risk of the loss of funds now, vice pushing the reward gain out later in the out years from 5 to 7 years from now. With the $2 million from Start Sequence and the amount that they recovered from FTX, how does that get us to September and beyond for Star Atlas?
Yeah. So if you take into account their burn rates, you're talking about roughly $2 million of burn a month was our last forecasted point. We can't really know what was gained from the distressed firm, but we do know we gained about $2 million from Start Sequence. And we do know that we gained approximately 5 months of runway off of the things that have happened so far. So if we assume 5 months of runway is $10 million, then we've got 8 somewhere in there. I don't know Solana Foundation contributions. I don't know what happened with the recovered FTX funds, but it would seem that the company recovered a significant amount of money or got help from somewhere. What we do know is no deals have been struck with VCs yet. They're in late stage negotiations. So there's a lot of room for that to happen as well. And this is pure rumor and speculation. But, the scuttlebutt that I've heard is that any resistance Automata has in their negotiations with current VCs is based off of valuation for equity. I don't think Michael and the team are in a hurry to give away a large chunk of their company for cheap. I think with the runway that they've raised so far, knowing that they have 8 months ahead of them, potential rally in the markets, things seem to be improving, a lot of content about to be releasing. They'd rather keep their valuation high, and they can always lower it if they need to as they get further down that runway. I don't think that's a bad call, but everything that I've heard, and again, this is pure rumor, speculation from different people, is any resistance they would be having is based around valuation, which you could always back down from. You could say our company's worth $300 million today, and this is how we want to raise equity at that valuation. If you really needed to, you could just as easily value it at $150 million, 3 months from now. And people who would have passed on the previous deal will buy into the next one. The fact that they have 8 months of runway ahead of them gives them a lot of flexibility in their raise. We think about 8 months like, it's the shortest time in the world. They're intending to release some really major things in the next couple of months. The market seems to be improving. I think they're interested in raising money, but they're interested in doing it under their terms. They're not pushing their foot all the way on the gas. It'll be interesting to see.
I'm sure the community would be excited to have news of a VC deal in the near term, but it seems like Automata and Michael are really protecting the future valuation of the company and not selling out too quick to ensure the continued longevity of the project. Now, obviously, that's probably more than a few months out and quite possibly even past September. During the town hall, you asked the only questions during the town hall of how does Star Atlas get from today or really Sage release to September and beyond? And that's really speaking to the other earning mechanisms aside from a VC deal that Automata could implement.
So there was a lot to Michael's answer that I'm sure anybody who listened would have heard. I asked a pretty open-ended, thorny, complicated question, and it was essentially, okay, well, you've got 8 months of cash runway. We're just going to call it cash. We're not counting tokens. We're not counting the Atlas you hold. We're not counting the Polis you hold. We're not counting any other deals, things like that, in-game revenue. We're just talking about your cash. So it's a very natural thought when you hear Michael and team talk about multiple years from now to go, okay, well, you've got 8 months worth of cash. You've got plans that take you all the way out to 2 or 3 years from now. How do you anticipate bridging that gap? Are you looking for in-game transactions to bridge that for you? Is it going to be naturally occurring revenue once the game launches? Are you intending more asset sales? Like, do we see more ships, more offerings, avatars getting launched, all kinds of other things. Um, I was really curious to see how Michael envisions in his head strategically getting from a raw 8-month cash position to like, we're 3 years from now and we're still pumping and going along. And his answer was really multifaceted. And I appreciated it. I encourage anybody who hasn't heard it to go back and listen to it. It's 15 minutes of a lot. I would suggest listening to it multiple times. But he pointed out various strategies for raising funds over time, starting with in-game transactions. He really wants to grow the game economy. That's the primary means through which they want to fund the project. So if you get a live functional game with a lot of people onboarding and interested in it, some of these problems start to solve themselves. We think of the fee system as being based in the galactic marketplace when we buy and sell ships. But I think it's easy to look at that in a very linear way and not realize that the whole universe of Star Atlas is about to expand. Once you start playing Sage and there's this whole giant system going on and this fee is live in all of it, what we're doing in terms of transactions could 10 to 20x, because it's no longer just moving ships around anymore. A big thing Michael cited was Axie Infinity back in the day at points of peak popularity. Just in-game fees and transactions, they were raising over like $100 million in a month. And that wasn't selling things. That was just the game being live and a bunch of people pumping through it. Clearly, $100 million is multiple years of runway for Star Atlas. We're not saying they're going to do that, but we shouldn't underestimate what in-game transactions can do. The next facet of what he talked about was software as a service. So a lot of the things that they're building for Star Atlas, the core APIs, the framework, they're creating a lot of things that work on Solana as technologies that could be used by other companies and projects. And they look at that as a source of funding for them that's completely untapped, that they're excited about. So Starcom, for instance, they set up to be able to use the Solana network essentially as a gigantic global decentralized cloud gaming server is pretty insane. If that's successful, the applications for it could be huge. They could be able to market that to other projects, lend it as a service to other people who are building in the ecosystem. Their fuzzy lemur indexer for the network. They think a lot of the backend architecture that they're building will have value beyond Star Atlas to a lot of other people, and they view that as a potential funding source. Next, they talked about the massive amount of Atlas that they have and how under better market conditions, that Atlas could be worth, well over $100 million by itself. And they intend over time, while trying to be market neutral, to get rid of some of those tokens. When we have a game up and running, everything's doing really well, and there's a good market for doing it. That's going to be a source of fundraising for them. They got into the Polis DAO and the current treasury for it, the ability to support hackathons, co-development, Automata potentially lending IP rights to the DAO, where the DAO could then vote on the usage of IP for Automata's brand and things that it creates. So you would have a revenue source for the DAO, which is new. And in turn, the DAO could compensate Automata back for that revenue sharing. There's a lot. They've recently, of course, you published, they untethered their IP policy where people could potentially start making things for Star Atlas, selling them individually and below $1 million worth of revenue. Like they could do that entirely, right? On their own. And above that, they start partnering and working with Automata for some type of revenue sharing. Michael's response was multifaceted. I liked it. I felt good about it. Really, the driving theme was they want to get the game up and running. They want to get the economy going. And they think with, a good degree of adoption, that economy can do a lot of things for them. So they want to get that started as quickly as possible. They want to empower people. They want to grow the ecosystem organically. I felt good about it, meaning you're talking about a guy who's got 8 months of raw cash a whole bunch of tokens, which he hasn't cashed in, isn't using, and a game that's about to go live to some extent. I think he's got a lot of cards to play. There's a lot of economic levers to manage. All of that still includes a VC deal, which could be done at any given point. We could find out, 6 weeks from now that, some VC signed a deal with Star Atlas. They're going to be a long-term partner. They raised $35 million, and they no longer have any kind of runway concern at all. So I liked the answer. And I also liked the fact that he qualified it when he ended it, saying, nothing about this is certain. This is a risky industry. We're making assumptions about a lot of different things about how the game economy will work, how we can market things, but, those are the risks of the space. I think he's thinking well about it. And I asked him a really complicated, involved question, and he gave me a really, really deep response, which if you kind of set aside your disappointment about not getting raw numbers for finances, like you pretty much got Mike Wagner's entire blueprint for how he's going to steer the financials of the business and exactly what he's looking to do. And I think that data is far more powerful if you're really thinking about it.
Certainly a lot of options for Michael Wagner Automata on the table. And it no longer seems that the company is backed into a corner with the September 2023 extension runway that they once were in November. Signal, your insights are always valuable, and thanks again for joining us today.
No, it's always an absolute pleasure, my friend. Thank you for having me.
And that concludes this week's episode. If you'd like today's news and coverage, be sure to like and subscribe to receive the Star Atlas news that you need to stay one step ahead. Once again, I'm your host, Criggs, and you've been listening to the Hologram News Network.